Hey, who'd you talk to? What's going on? It's me. It's Mike Lepre, King Michael. This is Legit Paranormal. It is. It's Legit Paranormal. I know it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, January 12th, 2022, which is 0112-2022. View Math Geeks joining me always. Genius Kev. What's up, Kev?
Hey, King. No, not too much. I'm, just trying to readjust the rhythm a little bit for a Wednesday night paranormal show. Usually Wednesday is one of my off nights, so gonna try to make sure I bring some energy to the show.
Yeah, usually right around now I'm talking wrestling with Joey Paranormal, so it's gonna be a totally different type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here comes the man though that makes it official. It's Buddy Thayer. What's up, buddy?
Not much, guys. It's weird seeing you guys middle of the week, and middle of the week, I figured like, hey, why not? It's a show. I might as well have a beer. I came from the gym. I just burned off 6,000 calories at CrossFit. So I'm like, why not? I might as well. And if I'm going to pick a beer, it's going to be on a Wednesday night with a guest from Massachusetts. Then it's going to be a great beer because I don't drink shitty beers, as we know. And it's going to be one of my favorites from Massachusetts, Treehouse Brewery. They make a lovely series called the Storm series, the Hurricane, the Typhoon. This one is called Galactic Storm. It's an Imperial IPA, which means it's super. And it's 8.8% alcohol by volume. So just one of these, and I'll probably be have numbness in my toes by the end of the evening.
It's good to see that they put the money in the beer and not the production of the can, Kev, because that can
it's pretty can. It's
that's basic as basic can get. What the heck? Just take it away. Just take it away. It looks like a old lady's candle. It's just ridiculous.
Mike, this is a grown man's beer.
All right, buddy. You got to do the introduction. Good luck with it.
Oh, boy. Okay, so joining us live this evening on our special Wednesday edition of Legit Paranormal, we have he's the host of Midnight Society and one of the founders of Midnight FM online radio network. He's also the host and co-creator of Spooky South Coast, one of the world's longest-running radio programs on the topic of the paranormal. He's the last successor to the legendary Art Bell show, Midnight in the Desert program. He's authored various books, and he's been on and produced and written for various programs on the Travel Channel, the Weather Channel, Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted Towns. Worked on the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, and he's a great guy. He's a good lecturer to capture at if you go to one of these conventions. Go see Tim Weisberg, our guest. Tim, welcome.
What's up, Tim?
How's it going, Tim?
Thanks for having me. And buddy, I just want to say that was an unfair shot at your beer. That is definitely not a candle. That is made out of the remnants of a Lisa Frank Trapper Keeper. That my sister so great. So
especially my haunt are the Trapper Keepers.
I'll keep it. I'll buy it. I'll take it. So, Tim, I listened to a bunch of your shows. I've seen you on different podcasts, and it's weird to me. What I came away with is you're really good at dealing with different personalities on different shows. Because I think I saw you say the same thing where one person was like, and then Tim, what happens next? And then one other guy was like, hey, Tim, what happened next? And you just, I appreciate that. Like, you definitely are from the Northeast, because it's like, you must deal with, you're thinking right now you're dealing with one, but you must deal with maniacs most of the time, right?
Well, I mean, I like to look at it like this. I think everybody's a little nuts. So if you come into it with that, you are, people come up to me all the time, like, you're going to think I'm crazy when I tell you this. And I say, you probably are crazy. We all are. We're all a little crazy. But, it's more about just making
I know. No, I know this. Yeah.
Everybody has their own tone that they can take with talking about these kind of topics. Not everybody is set up to talk about it seriously. They need to have a little bit of laughs to make themselves feel better. Other people don't want any kind of silliness associated with it because it's so profound to them. So you kind of just learn as you go through this. I've been doing paranormal radio now 16 years. You kind of just learn in each conversation where to go with it to make the other people in the conversation and people listening feel comfortable.
Yeah, I can see those as the polar opposites. Is like the different type of people that want to tune in.
Sometimes you get people that are doing this because they're investigators themselves, or because they've had experiences. Sometimes you have people who are total skeptics that just want to hear a good story. and some people don't care whether the paranormal is real or not. They just want a voice in the night to keep them entertained while they're trying to fall asleep or while they're working or driving a truck or something.
That's kind of creepy right there, but true, right? They
Yeah.
need a voice to fall asleep to. You know what?
I
They would
can't
never
believe
pick
it.
mine, Tim. They would never pick mine. Yours is a good one. They ain't falling asleep.
I don't agree. I don't know why people like my voice. I hear it on recordings and I'm like, I still sound terrible. There's actually a clip floating around on YouTube. We were talking about sports before we came on the air. There's a clip of an old show that used to be on here in New England called Mike Adams Sports World. It used to be on the New England Cable News Channel. And I called in one night and got into an argument with Bruins great Lyndon Byers about whether or not the Celtics should keep Eric Montross. And if you heard my voice in that clip, I have the most masshole accent you've ever heard. I'm like, you got your Walker, you got your Eric Williams, but what are they? And it was ridiculous. And I said, I don't know if I was doing like a caricature, if that's really how I talked back then. And
I'm
might have been how I talked.
I think I got an idea because you remember Jim Rome?
Oh yeah.
All right, so right around when the Patriots were going to play Cleveland before the Patriots were going to Super Bowl, I got through to Jim Rome, and I pretended to be a New England Patriots fan. So I was using that accent and going through it, and all I wanted to say was this. I said, but at the end of the day, Jim, it all comes down to food. I go, it was Boston. What's the word I'm looking for? It was Boston something or Cleveland Steamers. And it was like all you heard was Rome's voice go, no. And they went right on to the next topic. It's such for me, that's an epic moment in my life, but for most people, probably a waste of time, about 15, 20 minutes.
Did he hit the dump button on you, or did it get through to air?
It got through the air. That's I got a call from a buddy in Arizona, and he goes, "You just on the radio?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "I knew it was you." Yeah, I got through. But all that fun. But so the Art Bell show, that was my go-to if I wanted to fall asleep or I just wanted to listen to stuff, especially around 9/11, right? That was like a big time where the commercials were about like food and gas masks and all that stuff. It was just a really interesting time to be listening to that show and being part of that station, like listening to it. Can you explain what your connection was with it? Kind of.
Well, I mean, I was always somebody, from the time I was a kid in high school, driving around my car late at night. I just loved to drive around. I would drive around listening to music, and then you turn on the AM dial, and you're like, hey, what's this guy talking about? He's talking about UFOs and Bigfoot and ghosts. Like, that's stuff I'd always been interested in. And then as the years progressed, obviously I'm listening to it a little bit differently when I become a host on my own, doing Spooky South Coast. And I kind of always had in the back of my mind, someday I want that job. Someday I want that job. I'd love to just get paid to do that for a living. And I got the chance, I think in 2012, thereabouts, 2014. I forget when my Haunted Objects book came out, but I had the opportunity to go on and be a guest, I think a couple times on Coast to Coast with George. And so I was like, okay, that's kind of the end of my association with that. Flash forward a couple of years, Art Bell passed away. Dave Schrader had taken over the Midnight in the Desert show, and he wanted somebody to be his fill-in because he was going to be going out doing a lot of events. And at the time, we didn't realize he would also be filming what would become the Holzer Files. So I would be the guy who would cover for him when he'd have to be out for weeks at a time filming. And eventually it got to the point when they got season 2 where he had so much on his plate that I just ended up taking over Midnight in the Desert. And I had a whopping 3-month run before new owners came in and bought the network that it was on, the Dark Matter Digital Network, and said, you know what, we're going to turn this into flat earth conspiracy theory. Isn't real, that kind of radio. And I wasn't comfortable with it. They presented me with a really crap deal where I would have lost the weeknight show and they would have given me something on the weekends. And I said, can you just give me a couple of days to think about it? And thankfully, they fired me the morning I was supposed to call them to tell them what I wanted to do. So I didn't have to quit. They took care of it for me. And I'm so glad they did because that led to us starting Midnight FM and really being able to kind of redefine what late night talk radio can be.
But so you drove the car around for a little bit.
I did, and I enjoyed it. I felt a lot of pressure because everybody that was listening was an Art Bell fan or a Dave Schrader fan. So I have to carry in their footsteps. when I did, lose that position and we started Midnight Society on Midnight FM, it was like that weight had been lifted. No more expectations. Now I can just be Tim. I don't have to be doing what people would have expected, Art Bell in 2020 to sound like.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to walk into those.
Yeah, it's a very tough act to follow because he was doing like 4 or 5 hours a night, which is a long show. And I remember my dad I got introduced to it because my dad used to listen to it and he used to fall asleep to it. And now this is got to be the 80s, and that's how I found it. And I started doing the same thing. It's like everyone that got into that show, it's kind of a similar story. But as I get older, I'm like, how the heck is this guy doing 4 hours a night every night on that subject matter? And he wasn't like he was phoning it in. Like it was cool. It was interesting. It was fun, and the pace was pretty quick. So yeah, definitely a kind of hard act to follow, especially as years go on and you're competing with the internet and the amount of information people can get and all that stuff. So I commend you for for the run.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was doing 4 hours when I first took over for him, and I was like, it's not a big deal. I work I'm in my office where I work at the radio station I work at during the day. And I've gone on and done 4 hours. Like, that's not a big deal, but it's a big difference when you're 4 hours in the morning and you're getting call after call after call as compared to doing 4 hours at night, especially where, at that point in time, the audience had dropped off to the point where they weren't sitting there waiting to call. So you didn't have the phone calls to bail you out. So you're really doing 4 straight hours with that guest. And my producer, Michelle, will tell you, not every guest is built for 4 hours. I mean, I was making some chicken salad at times when I didn't have the right ingredients to work with. And nothing against the guests. It's just there's a difference, especially in today's world where people are used to these quick podcasts that are, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, even 2 hours. But they don't have the stamina or the coverage of a topic to go for 4. And so it was a challenge. So when we started Midnight Society, we knocked it down to 3. Then we knocked it down to 2. We were doing 5 nights a week, but because of my schedule, we had to cut it back down to just Friday nights. But, still having the opportunity to get there and explore these topics. And it's not a paranormal show. It's a late night show. So we don't have to talk paranormal. I can have on, I've had on guys from Star Trek. I've had on one of my favorite shows. I interviewed Matt Sharp from The Rentals, formerly of Weezer, who gave us all of our theme music that we use. You can just whatever you think that people want to hear when you're driving around late at night.
See, here's the thing. So, buddy, I started a podcast platform for our basketball show, our football show. Then there's a wrestling show. But I Sunday night, I'm like, I want to do an Art Bell type show on a Sunday night just because that was like one of my favorite shows growing up. So I wanted Buddy to do it, and I didn't think I was going to have anything to do with it. But it's been now officially over a year. And it's like we've been learning all these different things and like things I've never heard of, right, Kev? Like just it's like a complete
some of the cryptids
PowerPoint. But and we've done so many different things. Went on the USS Salem. It was just a lot going on all in 1 year that we took in. And but what I did notice is that the community itself, they don't band together like I've seen in like maybe sports groups or band groups, stuff like that. Then, like, in other words, because I'm thinking, why wouldn't you start a channel? Like, why does everybody think of a show when you could start a channel? And what I'm saying is, everyone goes, "Oh, I'm going to do a show," and I'm thinking, well, why don't you do a show? Have someone else do a show after you do your show, and then just keep adding them. And guess what? You know what I mean? You have programming. So why would you not do that? I mean, not saying you. I'm just saying in general. I always wondered why they don't just come together and do something like that.
And when we launched Midnight FM, we started off with just the Midnight Society show to kind of get our feet wet. And then, so that was in April of 2020. By the summer of 2020, we had 22 different shows on the network.
Nice.
And if at any point there wasn't a live show being run or a recorded show that was scheduled, the rest of the time schedule fills in with old repeats of my Spooky South Coast show.
Perfect.
So you could tune in 24 hours a day and hear something. The problem is as we came out of the pandemic and people got back to work, people had less time to dedicate to creating the shows. We had less time dedicated to being able to program the network. And the money, to be honest with you, just wasn't coming in. We went from making thousands of dollars a month when I was on Midnight in the Desert, everybody that was involved, to, I haven't gotten paid for Midnight. I don't think it's, telling tales out of school here. We haven't gotten any money for Midnight Society in like 3 months. And when we do collect some money from it, it's just a couple of $100 each. So it's, it's not the kind of thing that we can dedicate all that time to anymore, but we still want to be able to be there for people and to provide that content. So we keep it alive, hoping that, someday maybe the tide turns in terms of just our own personal lives, that we can dedicate the time to it. We realize a network sitting there without a full network of programming isn't ever going to grow, but maybe one of us has the opportunity in our own lives to be able to focus more time on it.
That's kind of what we did with Legit Podcast. It's got the paranormal now. It's got the fantasy sports one. Just doing this show alone has been fun. Like the people that we've met or that it's reached, it's crazy. You know what I mean? And I take everything serious. I always take everything serious. If someone sounds like they're bullshit, then I start to feel like they're bullshit. Like I go by feeling. Like I don't judge anybody when I first talk to them. Kev, what about you though? You got some bad traits. So what do you think?
No, I was gonna what I was gonna ask, and Tim, you kind of got into it a little bit yourself. There is like I listen to some of the Midnight FM. I watch some of the YouTube stuff. You kind of touch all bases. I saw like you have people that are mediums, Reiki, UFOs, abduction, just ghosts, like all over the place. I guess. Sort of where does and it's a great idea for the Midnight FM channel to have all that variety. But kind of where does your heart lie in all this? Like if you if you had to focus on one or one sort of makes you a little more happy than the others, what would it be?
I'm a ghost guy. I would have just talked about ghosts for the entire majority of my career. Part of it was that we realized that the audience wanted to hear about more. And we figured as we grew and we had the access to people, like, why not talk about other topics? There was a time when, Lauren Coleman was impossible to get for an interview. And I ended up winning him over because he found out I was a sports writer and he's a huge Red Sox fan. So, we're sitting there in the green room of a paranormal conference watching a Red Sox playoff game. Like that's what we prided ourselves on. Because at the time there was only a handful of paranormal shows. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, if we can cover these topics. So we brought in one of my co-hosts, Matt Moniz, who worked for years in the abductee field. So it's like, okay, we definitely have to bring more of that in. And then as you go along and you learn, one of the things that I've come away with is you really can't segment all of this stuff like it used to be in the 70s and the 80s, where most people didn't talk to UFO people and UFO people thought cryptid people were crazy. Like all that's out the window now because we're starting to realize, at least in my opinion, it's all the same stuff. It's just different modalities of the same kind of unknown energy manifesting itself. And for you, it might be a UFO. For me, it might be a ghost. For somebody else, it might be, a four-legged hairy hominid creature.
All right. Wait a minute. Let's stop these presses for 1 second. Say that again about what's going on. I guess, are you saying that there's like different dimensions crossing?
It's more of what we would consider to be like a unified theory of everything in the paranormal. So no matter what you're encountering that's paranormal, it all is this same force that's out there. Now, what generates that force, we don't know. Could it be natural, something on Earth? Could it be something that comes from outer space, something that comes from another dimension, something that comes from within the Earth? Could it be something that comes from within us? Is it something that, do we create ghosts by believing in them? Which, buddy, I'm sure you've done plenty of investigations where you've said we might have a thought form that we're dealing with here.
Right.
These kind of different ways of us encountering energy, no matter where that energy is coming from, that energy has learned that if it disguises itself as these different beings, it will get different reactions out of people. For me, I'm more interested in a ghost, so they're going to get that rise out of me in that way.
You're getting, but that's also giving credence to like the idiots with the real stupid like things that they encounter that obviously can't be real. So now we're saying to them it can be real. Like if a guy was like 7-foot chicken, and a head like a baby baboon, and his feet look like a duck. You know what I mean? Like, you'd be like, yeah.
I had to take a journey with myself to be able to go down that road. I had to kind of figure out like how far am I willing to go with that. And what I realized is if somebody told me they saw a 7-foot chicken with a human baby head, I don't know because I wasn't there. So I can't say that they did or they didn't. I can say that to me it sounds extremely unlikely, and I've never heard of that. But then what I also think about is I've seen some really weird stuff that I can't explain. So maybe the energy that I encountered that manifested itself as these weird things that I've
That's
seen.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
This is just how they processed it. It does. You and I could be standing next to each other in the dark, and you could see something completely different than what it is that I see. It's all in how we perceive that energy. Sometimes we're going to get the same thing, but sometimes we'll get something completely different.
So we kind of have to listen to the ones we think are really stupid, because to them
we use a phrase in journalism: trust but verify. So you're trusting what it is that they're telling you, but you also kind of want to go through and make sure that what they're telling you is legitimate. So I will never really dismiss somebody's claim. I will question that. So if they told me that they saw this giant 7-foot chicken, I'll say, well, are you sure it was definitely a chicken, or did it just seem something that was shaped like one? And then what made you think of a chicken? Because sometimes it's our own prejudices and preconceived notions that make us think these things. Sometimes it's a trigger. There's a trigger in our mind that makes us see something as a way to kind of cope with what it is that we're seeing. You know, I went through an experience one time where my grandparents' house had burned down. And when I walked into the door and I looked into the kitchen, the charred remains of the kitchen, when I opened the door, it looked like it always had, until I kind of shook my head and opened my eyes, and then I could see it was really burned. So sometimes our mind has to put up these screen memories or these screen visions for us to be able to handle the trauma, and that could absolutely be happening with people with paranormal experiences. I mean, just as an example, sorry, not to cut you off, just as an example, how many people that are UFO abductees tell you, they don't tell you it was a little gray man that came into their room, it was SpongeBob SquarePants. Or, you know, I was in my room and all of a sudden my best friend from when I was 9 years old, who was still 9 years old, came into my room and told me to go with him. Like, you know, those kind of things happen all the time in abductee experiences. So why not in other aspects of the paranormal?
Yeah, that's interesting. I can follow that. So when you were mentioning ghosts at the beginning of this of this part of the conversation, you talked about do we see ghosts, or do we believe in? Is it because we believe in them and because we're open to them that we see them? And someone else, one of our other guests, or a couple of other guests, has said something similar. But when I hear something like that, it makes me wonder, like, how do you get sort of objective evidence if you and I see, we're in the same room and you feel something, you see something, and I don't, because my mind isn't open. I'm kind of stuck on that. Like, how do you bring the objectiveness to it? Because I think that has to happen in order to take a huge step forward.
And I thought the same thing for many years, and I've come to the conclusion that it is a subjective experience no matter what. So you use the term that I think a lot of people use when it comes to paranormal activity, but that I'm trying to break myself of using, that being evidence. Because evidence implies that we are proving something, and I don't know that we will ever be able to prove it on a wide scale. We can only kind of prove it to people on a case-by-case basis. So I look for data. That I'm collecting data when I'm on an investigation, and I'm collecting experiences. And I fully...
You're researching.
I am. And I'm subscribing to the idea that this activity is happening because I'm there to observe it. And if I wasn't there, would it happen? Probably not. So with that in mind, you have to have that personal human subjective experience in order for it to even exist in the first place. So you can't pull that out and have it be completely objective.
Even the word evidence has a negative tone. That you have to have, you're looking for evidence. Like, that just has a negative tone, like a detective tone. Like, get it out of there. If you're researching it better.
You found the best piece of, quote unquote, evidence ever. It's still not going to convince people that are skeptical until they're the ones that go out there and have the experience. Right. So you're automatically tainting the data that you've collected with an expectation that's unnecessary and will cause them not to look at it with an open mind.
I can follow that. That makes sense. And it's cool to kind of hear that you've kind of been thinking about this for a long time, and it sounds like your beliefs and approaches have been kind of well refined. I'm gonna have to think about this a little more, but I like kind of the way you went through it.
I think it's the sports writer in me. You know, you can't have the same team year after year if you're a fan of a franchise. You know that if you have a different quarterback come into a team, the system might change a little bit. You know that depending on the skills of the players that you have, you might have to adapt the way that you play the game. It's still the same general game, and you're still following the same general rules, but you can't expect that same outcome all the time. You just kind of have to go into the game itself, execute all the plays as best you can, and then see what happens at the end.
All right, but what if you're a Giant fan and you have to walk 5 years with them just week after week ripping pieces of your soul and taking it with them?
Poor you, Mike. Cry me a river about the Giants.
5 years of it.
20 years as a Dolphins fan. So let's talk about it.
In that case, no, in that case, I say you basically stole away 2 Super Bowls from the Patriots. So the 5 years that you dealt with, not that big of a deal.
Is that
I don't say steal. It was legitimate, but it was just incredible circumstances that led to those wins.
Eli Manning, right? Was that
Eli Manning being a 2-time Super Bowl champion is a paranormal activity at its own.
You know what? He just went into savant mode though at certain times.
Yeah.
In a sense, so it's like
it's like you're a wrestling fan. You're a wrestling fan.
Oh, yeah.
So when Festus was in the WWE, he just stands there with his eyes crossed until the bell rings, and then he goes nuts. That's Eli Manning in a Super Bowl.
Yeah. All right, I get that. In the fourth quarter. All right.
Same
I
accent.
get that. All right. So you got into this. This is what you wanted to do. Art Bell was a big that show is an influence. How did you start doing your own investigating? Like where did you start? Like did you go for big places right away, or how did you start your whole adventures?
I honestly never thought that I would actually ever investigate myself. I had activity and encounters and experiences when I was growing up. But when we decided to do the Spooky South Coast radio show in 2006, I was totally going to armchair quarterback the paranormal. I was going to just sit in the studio, let everybody tell me about what they do on investigations and their experiences. And then, that was going to be my contribution to the paranormal world. And then about 3 months in, we brought Matt Moniz on the program, and he had been somebody who had been investigating for, I think at that point, 20 years since he was a teenager. And so he said to us, he's like, no, you're not going to sit here and just talk about it. You're going to go out there and look for it. And he took us out on our first investigation to a local cemetery. We were there for maybe an hour, and I caught a couple of EVPs, including one that appeared on 3 different recorders with 3 different various speeds and 3 different words being said, but all at the same time. It just kind of blew my mind how much it was different, but the same. And from that point on, I was hooked. So that got me into, wanting to go. I think my next investigation was probably the Lizzie Borden house. And then from there, it only took a couple of years and meeting and befriending Jeff Belanger. We started a company called Legend Trips. And we spent the next decade or so taking people out to these historic haunts and raising, over $35,000 to help these places stay alive.
All right, so wait a minute. Three separate voices at the same exact time.
The same voice on 3 different recorders, but one was analog, 2 were digital, or it might have been 1 digital, 2 analog, and each one kind of sounded like something different, even though it was the same voice
at the same time.
At the same time.
So now here's where I was questioning this. So is there 3 versions of that? You see what I'm getting at? Is there I don't want to use the word multiverse, but is there multiple realities going up? Is that why there were 3 different things being said at the exact same time?
So if you asked me back then, I would have said it's the same thing being spoken, the same one sentence being spoken by the spirit. And that these recorders, because of their different technologies, not being the same brand and the same model, they took it in different ways, and that affected what it was that we heard out of the recording. Now that I've started to realize some of the, the more metaphysical aspects to the paranormal and how we influence it and relate it with our own energies and intentions, now I'm thinking to myself, is it more because this happened, but there were 3 different people holding these recorders, and that each person, as the subconscious experiencer of this recorded voice, we kind of took it in and we helped it manifest onto that recording. And so there's going to be that difference between it. And here it is, all these years later. And I don't think I've ever had that same experience where multiple recorders at the same time picked up the same EVP.
I get a question for you, Tim. So I have had this experience myself where I've had 3 or 4 recorders pick up the same EVP, and one recorder will be super clear, and others will be a little bit. It sounds a little bit more distance, and then other times I've had 2 recorders like next to each other, and one will pick up the EVP clear as day, and the other one nothing. Is it and no one's holding it? It was like sitting on a bed in a bed of breakfast.
To me, that gives credence to the idea that it's either the spirit imprinting the message, which is kind of what most people accept, or that it's the investigator helping to imprint that message. That's our own psychic abilities helping to imprint that message. And the fact that if it was something that was spoken out loud, or something that even came at an ultra low frequency, as long as both recorders are capable of picking up the same frequency, then you should have got it on both. So there was a reason why it went on one and not the other. We had an experience.
Both recorders in the same investigation picked up things together almost the whole rest of the night when they were near each other. But that one instance, they were like right on a bed, and one did and one didn't. And it was the one that did. It was clear as day. It was like the woman was like, "Hello," right into the recorder.
It could have been that there was so much energy to focus on that let's focus it all on one instead of 2, so that it becomes a stronger burst of energy. We had one at Lizzie Borden's in the early days of my investigating there. We were there with some of the crew from Ghost Hunters, just on an off night, hanging out and investigating. And there was 4 of us in the room. We each had a recorder, 4 recorders, all close to each other in the room, and we all heard this audible growl come in the room that we could all hear, long, low. And so we immediately all go play back our recorders. It didn't show up on any one of them, but we all heard it, and it didn't make it onto the recording. So I just think they have total ability to shield, manipulate, imprint, whatever it is they want to do.
Mm-hmm. So all this stuff is going on around us at all times, and just certain people can see certain things into it, almost like they have moments where they kind of cross over in you know what I'm trying to say? Like some people see ghosts, some people don't. So it's going to be happening. It's going to be happening nonetheless, right? For someone to see it. So it's just that they can kind of lean into it and see what we can't.
In the early days of parapsychology research, the Ryan Institute, the Duke Paranormal Studies, like a lot of those groups and studies looked into the idea of beta waves versus alpha waves. The beta waves are where our minds go when we're asleep, and it's where our subconscious kind of takes over. And they found that people who claim to have psi abilities, the ability to move things with their mind, to remote view, to predict the future, things like that, they operate more with their brain waves in beta during the day than in alpha. So we've started to find that there are people who, the more you investigate, because now we've got this a mass group of people, more people than I've ever investigated before, sharing their data with each other through social media and the internet. And we're starting to see the patterns that have emerged over time. And in these 2 decades of this surge, what we've noticed is that the more people spend time doing this, the more they are kind of operating in those beta waves. And they're already walking into a place and saying, "Oh, I can feel something here." They don't claim to be psychic, but they can pick up on that energy. They kind of know what's going on. So you're able to have more activity happen on these investigations because you're already in a different place than you might have been 10 years ago when you went on your first investigation. It's not a matter of skill, where you learn. I mean, there is some skill that you learn and perfect as you go along, but I also think there's a great degree of your own consciousness paradigm shift as you go through this, getting there to where you need to be. Some people are just naturally already at that level. And, somebody like my friend Stephanie Burke, who co-hosts Spooky South Coast with me, she's a psychic and a medium. She has been her whole life. She was just born into being at a different level than the rest of us. Other people, you have to try to get to it yourself, and not everybody has the chance to get there, but we can all get glimpses of it because we're all capable of it. It's just not everybody lets themselves be.
See, Tim, when you say that, I went on one investigation. So I went on the USS Salem, and we won't talk about how I was with Buddy and his group, the Beta group, and Kev ended up in the horrible group. We'll call them Group B for now. But I went in like kind of happy, and my only issue, and Buddy knows, is that I kept staring at people, not at people, but I kept staring. I felt like I had to stare down stuff in certain rooms. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just crazy, but and I would always, like, if I saw a room, I would always try to go figure out where I thought the worst possible place in that room would be, if that makes any sense too. And then I would go stand there because I want to just stand there. I caught myself talking in my head a couple times, like just telling people who I was, and I meant no harm. And then a couple rooms I had chest problems, a couple rooms I didn't. And like that's just me being a goof, you know, a chooch going on USS Salem, and I'm just walking around. Like, you know, having to like banging, laughing my ass off because Buddy keeps banging his head because those ships were not built for anybody that's 6'4". He dong dong. But it was like, I don't know. I felt energy. I felt happy in some rooms. I felt not happy in some rooms, and Buddy was with me, so Buddy understands what I'm saying, right?
It was a very honestly walking that ship. You go down the stairs and you're on that main deck level. I don't know if you've ever been on the Salem, Tim, and where the mess halls are and stuff. And it wasn't so bad. And then you start going down the hallway. And I don't ever claim to be psychic or have any sensitivity, but I definitely can feel. I don't know. Maybe it's a change of pressure, but holy shit! The more you walk down there, especially when I was by myself, it was an overwhelming feeling. And
so I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what I think might happen there, and then I'll share an experience I had on the Salem recently. Okay. So I do think that there are some physical properties to that ship, and that will affect you if you're open to being affected by it. So just the fact that you're surrounded by so much metal, in parts of it you're underwater. You know, there's a lot of EMF leakage that happens in that ship, as anybody that investigates it knows. You know, there's there's the funhouse effect of being floating on the water and having all this warped floorboards and everything else that's going on in there, having the knee knockers to walk over. Like, there is a sense of all of that physically that can affect you. But there's also all those objects that are still there from the time that people just walked off the ship when it was decommissioned and left them there. There's the museum where they brought in all these objects that have energies attached to it. I don't even like going down to the lowest deck by myself, and I'm usually not afraid of anything. And, you know, so all of these problems will kind of manifest itself in having you feel that way. But I was there in September for the Mass Paracon. It was my first time ever being on that ship with the Greater Boston Paranormal Associates who run the investigation.
It's phenomenal. Well done.
And I had never worked with him before, and I had never heard the stories of the captain, this entity that they had been associating with. So I'm in third mess where I've had a lot of activity, and I'm watching I'm supposed to stay there, and these groups are going to cycle through to investigate. So as I'm staying there, I'm watching the first group do all their experiments, and the thought just pops into my head: this is stupid. This is dumb. Why do you believe in this stuff anymore? Like, look at the kind of idiots that believe in the paranormal. Like, and all of these thoughts that are not my own are in my head, things that I wouldn't normally think about. And by the time the second group came through, I was ready to pack all my stuff up, get in my car, drive away, and quit the paranormal forever. At one point, you know, there was people that I've known for a long time that are leading the investigation. I'm like, you're so stupid. Why do you believe that? Like, you just sound like a moron. And my friend Jeff Campbell was there, and he told me, he's like, your face was physically changing. I was worried about you. Like, you did not look like yourself. And when they were telling me about the captain and how it took them a long time for them to convince the captain about the paranormal, because even as a ghost, he didn't believe, it started to enter my mind. And I realized, like, oh, wait a minute. I actually got influenced by an outside intelligence, and I'd never had that happen before. It blew my mind. I talked to Stephanie Burke about it, and she's like, yeah, welcome to my world. You know, that's been happening to me my whole life, so I'm glad you finally got to experience it. But
Tim, you just gave me the world's best excuse for the next time I go on the USS Salem with my wife when we're walking around, and I can say anything I want and be like, was it me? Remember what happened to Tim? He said it on the show. Was it my fault?
I blame everything on ghosts, so much so that ghosts probably hate me for it. But like, if anything happens, something falls up, it was a ghost. You know, like, it's just so much easier. And because I'm the guy saying it, people believe it's probably true. So I get away with that.
No, where do we have trouble, buddy? That one room, the chief's room.
The end where they thought they saw the chief. In the end of the very end of the ship. It was the officers' mess hall. where the chief has been seen like multiple times.
Third mess. Yeah. That's just a creepy area. And then if you start to even go behind that, in some of the areas,
right, Tim, clear as day. Mike was in the dark corner. He's like, "There's somebody in here. I know there's somebody in there." Like, Spirit, are you in there or where are you, Spirit? And clear as day in my recorder, sitting right on my lap, right next to you. Like, oh, get the fuck out of here! I love it. Oh my god!
And then he threw out my last name, and that was like, oh, all right, taking it to the street level. You know what I mean? Like, you're getting dirty with this. Okay.
They're saying, I know you. We were doing an event there one time, and I was in third mess, and all of a sudden this like purpley sweet smelling mist comes rolling into third mess. And I went out into the hallway outside, or whatever the next room is, and I was yelling at the two people that were sitting there. I was like, "Stop vaping! You're not supposed to be vaping in here. You're screwing people up." And like, I'm not vaping. And I was like, "We can see the smoke coming in. We can smell it." He goes, "I'm not vaping." And so then we go back into the room, and it happened again, and so it was somebody who was a relative of a friend of mine, and so I said to her, "I was like, you got to tell him to stop vaping." And she's like, if he says he's not vaping, he's not vaping. So then I was like, well, what the hell is going on here? I was ready to throw this guy off the ship because he wasn't following the rules. And it turned, so I was like, well, the ghosts are trying to get you in trouble. So.
Well, when we were on the ship, the motor turned on all of a sudden. The engine just went. And I said to Don, "What's going on?" He's like, "I don't know. It hasn't turned on in years." I'm like, "That's not a good sign. This is not a good sign."
That's what it felt like. The whole ship was moving.
The weird part was that was when it turned into the Love Boat, and you had a couple off at that point.
I would love to be on the Love Boat because 1, it looked like fun, and 2, that meant that I had my own sitcom.
Oh, and 3, what happened on the Love Boat stayed on the Love Boat.
Oh, so, that's true. I forgot that. Forget that. Every episode.
Put me on the episode with Charo. Coochie coochie.
I love Charo. Wow. Tim, you'd be a fan of Press Your Luck. Remember back in the day?
The whammies. Yeah.
All right, good. It was something from that same thing. I figured as much. All right, Kev, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask about Bridgewater Triangle, and areas like that kind of fascinate me because what is it about that particular area, and especially because you hear about Bermuda Triangle, you hear about other stuff, and being local. I never heard of it until I was kind of an adult, and the size of it, it's not that big. And then you hear all the different stories that happen there. And I guess you as kind of an expert in the space, maybe talk about a little bit kind of what some of your theories are on why it's happening, and then maybe a couple of cool stories on some of the things that you're aware of that have happened there.
Yeah, so the Bridgewater Triangle for me is I've expanded my definition of it. Lauren Coleman started off with Bridgewater, East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater. And then Aaron Cadieux in the documentary, they kind of expanded that to being a little bit bigger than that. I think it really goes from, all through Rhode Island, up through to southern New Hampshire, across to the western part of the state. It's a big swath of paranormal activity that happens at a higher rate than in other places. For me, I think that these were what John Keel called window areas. So these are places where you can kind of glimpse into other worlds, other dimensions, whatever you want to call it. To me, I think that there is, and some people use ley lines. I'm not a big ley line person, but I understand the concept. To me, there are these certain places where there is a thinning of the veil, where whatever the energetic grid is that protects us from all the things that would make us go crazy, there's certain spots where there's just not enough of that energy left to cover the whole area. So it's almost like when you have, you rip a hole in your sweater, and you can patch it, but eventually that patch is going to fall off and it's not going to protect it as well. And I think that that's what some of these areas are. And that's why as more activity happens, it actually seems to grow over time. So what you have happen is you've got, you can go all the way back to the colonial era. There's colonial reports from the colonial governor of Massachusetts, 2 different reports from him reporting UFOs, seeing these ships in the sky. And say what you want, but in the 1600s, that wasn't a weather balloon, that wasn't an airplane, that wasn't, all these other things that people call a drone. I know that I've had 3 different UFO encounters now in the Bridgewater Triangle that I can say were definitely not explainable. And you've got sea monster stories, going back to a time when They knew what whales were. So telling me, oh, they probably just ran into a whale and had never seen one before. No, they knew what a whale was. They saw whales coming over in the Mayflower. So if they saw a whale off the coast of Cape Cod, they knew what a whale was. When they're describing these giant sea serpents, that was something different.
Can I give you my one issue on that though?
What's
they
that?
They drank a lot. Like, they drank a lot.
They also had
scurvy.
They did. They had scurvy and they were malnourished. So they were probably seeing a lot of things.
That's what I'm saying.
On the Mayflower. But when we're talking about the Puritan era Massachusetts Bay Colony, where you didn't drink and you weren't supposed to believe in these kind of things because you'd be burned as a witch if you did. And people are still coming forward saying that they're having these experiences. I mean, those stand out to me because, nowadays people are prone to believing in the paranormal and talking about it openly. So you have to keep that in mind, that people now have a paranormal mindset when they have these encounters. Back then, they knew that you'd become a social pariah if you talked about these things, yet you still have important people like the governor of the colony saying these things are happening and these things are being reported.
So here's the thing with me. Two things. One, being from Rhode Island, we didn't know there was vampires apparently connected to Rhode Island. We learned that. Then we found it funny when they were describing a Tillinghast girl, because we went to high school with two Tillinghasts. They were really tall, blonde girls. So hearing that story freaked us out. But there's been, how do I want to phrase this? Kev, there's been certain stories, right, that we get connected to more. And then there's certain stories that we've had, not that we don't believe them, but it's almost like such a 50-50. You know what I'm trying to say? Does it make any sense to you?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure the one, like the negative ones. I remember the Tillinghast stuff. Yeah. The vampire stuff that we hadn't heard of, like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Thawing in the ice. Remember the thawing in the ice, like that it would bleed after it thawed out?
Oh, no, I don't remember that
part? Does anybody remember that part of the story?
Mercy Brown. They dug her up. They cut her heart open, and it was still bleeding months after she had died. But it was like the winter time, and her body was probably preserved in the ground.
Yeah, I mean,
and continued to grow hair and nails. Because she continued to grow hair and nails, and that was that basis for her being a vampire. That her hair grew, her nails grew, and her heart had blood in it, which is all very naturally explainable in modern medicine.
Yeah, her hair didn't grow and her nails didn't grow. Her skin just receded.
Yeah, So, well, I guess that's what I was trying to say in a dumb sort of way, Kev. I have my dumb moments where I'm trying to say that there's certain like parts of a story where I just can't go with that because it doesn't make sense at all. But for the most part, from what this triangle area has produced, it's the whole gamut of, like, if you did a Dungeons and Dragons version of this stuff, paranormal, it would have all the pieces from like ghosts to cryptids to everything, right?
But so would a lot of areas. I just think that because this has become a buzzword, and because the documentary came out in 2014 and got a lot of attention, and now we've got Aaron Mahnke doing podcast series about it, and it makes it onto American Horror Story and all that kind of stuff. Like, now it's become a legend, and you can never really contain a legend once it's let out of the bag. I like to use what I call it the Liberty Valance effect. And Buddy, you've heard me talk about this in my lectures. So there's a movie called The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Jimmy Stewart plays a lawyer in the Old West who comes from the East to the West, and he runs afoul of the outlaw Liberty Valance. And the aging gunfighter, played by John Wayne, bails him out by killing Liberty Valance, but everybody in town thinks that it was Jimmy Stewart that did it. And he's hailed as a hero, and for years he lives on the reputation of being the man who shot Liberty Valance. At the end of his life, he's telling the true story to a newspaper editor, and when the newspaper editor finally takes down the last of the story, Jimmy Stewart looks at him and he says, "Well, now are you going to print the truth?" And the editor looks at him and he says, "When the legend becomes fact, you print the legend." And that's what we deal with a lot of these places, that eventually the legend outgrows the truth. A case in point, the Assonet Ledge in the Freetown State Forest. Yeah. There's a long told story that was the site of a Native American, camp, Native American village. Though there was the Native American princess who was in love with the English settler. Her father would not let them be together. So distraught, and some people say the father might have killed the English settler, what have you. But the princess is very distraught. She leaps from the ledge, falls into the deep water below that we don't know how deep it is, and she drowns and dies. and now her spirit is seen wandering that ledge at night, not only appearing to people as a ghost, but also entering their minds and forcing them to jump off the ledge when they might not have done that otherwise. It's a great story and a great legend. The problem is that quarry, that ledge was actually part of a quarry that was dug out in the early 1900s. There was no ledge there at the time of the Native Americans. So like these kind of stories supersede that. And that doesn't mean that the people who go to the ledge and encounter the woman in white and have these thoughts and feelings and have these, visions of an apparition, it doesn't mean they're wrong. Because if we believe in that legend, we bring that legend to life.
I noticed that the dads become scapegoats, and a lot of these stories are even like all the way out to like fables. Like it's the dad that will say no and say no to the relationship, and it'll cause some sort of strife on either end. And all my life, I used to be like, how could there be dads like that? And now I have an 18-year-old daughter. And I hear those stories, and I think, well, maybe he was just thinking it over. He just wanted to think about the kid, figure out if he liked them. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I almost feel for the other side of it, like where I'm not as like,
But in those days, it was a lot harder. We're talking about the time of King Philip's War when the colonists and the natives were constantly at odds. There was a lot of, fundamental differences. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of, relationships, I'm sure, where there were Native Americans and settlers having relationships together. But you've also got to look at it in the way that the stories have been passed down. So the stories are told not because there is that there's a truth necessarily to it and that it's historical fact, but it's more to learn and to teach a lesson. So the idea is if you tell this story of the girl who led to her death because her father wouldn't let her be with a colonist, then that's going to make the younger Native American girls who hear this story say, well, I'm not going to go looking for a colonist for my boyfriend. I'm going to just find a nice Native American boy to shack up with. And that's going to, serve its purpose in that regard. Stories have never just been stories throughout human history. Stories have always been a way to entertain, inform, and a lot of the time control.
Yeah, we've had a couple of...
Kev, I got to say this. Tim, I absolutely love you. The way you're breaking this down right now is exactly how I see everything. That's how I always see it. I always think I'm crazy, but that's just kind of how I see it. You just explained it perfectly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Kev, that mindset is perfectly explained.
It's just you just got to go a little bit deeper. That's it. You just go deeper than the surface.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We've had a couple of folklorists on the show, and they've taken some of those stories. I don't think they did that one, but they did a number of other ones, and where they've just kept researching deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's just really, really cool to hear because, like I said, you take it at face value. You don't even know that there wasn't a quarry. There wasn't any water there at the time of that this legend supposedly happened. And when I first heard it, I was like, "There's professional folklorists? How is that a thing?" But then you kind of hear like, well, why are there all these vampire stories? Why are there all these other ones? And it's very, very, very interesting, and especially even some of the cryptids like Thunderbird and all that stuff. It's very, very interesting to go back further and further back.
And I'll caution you when it comes to Native American stories that if I had to put a number on it, and now this is just an estimate, I would guess that probably about 90% of the stories that we pass down as Native American stories were stories that were created by white people. Mm-hmm. That, the settlers told these stories that they had heard from the natives, or the natives say this or that, and it doesn't mean that it's true. And then there's also the possibility that if it was something they heard from the natives were just bullshitting them. They were telling them the story for a reason, to keep them away from an area. Like one of the things that happened here in the south coast of Massachusetts is, we talk about the Hockomock Swamp, and we talk about how it was the devil's land, and that the Native Americans didn't want anything to do with it, and they would tell the colonists, like, don't go there, you're going to die. That's the place where the spirits dwell. That's where the devil dwells. And you start to think, well, was that true? Or was that their way of protecting something that they might have had there? And that something could have been they were protecting the Bigfoot creatures that are seen there. That they had a reverence for them, and they were part of their belief system, and they didn't want the white man to encounter it. So there's reasons why these stories are told. I mean, just look at the witch stories. Witch stories have pervaded New England for generations, and usually it was a way to embarrass, to control, to to kind of delegitimize some of the women in the community. And in some ways, it was a way to take away anything that they had, their land, their money. Certainly, you see these, and all it took was if you were a woman who knew how to, cure people's ailments with plants, if you knew how to get animals to mate when they weren't doing it naturally, all these things you'd be accused of witchcraft because a woman was inferior and wasn't supposed to be smart enough to know how to do the things that a man did. So all of these mores of society shaped this culture and this folklore that we've carried forward with us to the point where now, we tell kids to be scared of witches, when in actuality, a witch is really just somebody who appreciates and understands nature. We should be teaching kids to be more like the witches.
I mean, that goes to show you what group hysteria can do for you, especially in the northeast parts. You get people going, and next thing you know, they're burning people. It was, that's a real odd thing. But all right, so you said it happens all over the world, not just in this triangle. This stuff happens a lot, but the triangle might be a little worn down in spots, so there's a little bit of a bleed through. The rest of the world, are there hot spots? Like not one area, but like a decent sized area that's a hot spot that we maybe not know.
Yeah, we have other areas that we call triangles. Of course, the Bermuda Triangle, I've been there a couple of times and investigated down there. Had some really strange stuff happen. In Vermont, they have the Bennington Triangle. But there's other places where they have a residence. A friend of mine lives in Sedona, Arizona. And that's a place that has a spiritual feeling to it. I have a friend who also lives on the island of Mauritius out in the Indian Ocean. And there's a lot of strange things that happen out there, including a lot of UFO activity. So you do have these different places around the world where, for some reason, and I honestly think part of it is our own culture and the fact that we're not so open to this. If you go to other cultures where they're more open to spirits and the ideas, spirits walk among them. In Asian cultures like Japan and China, where they honor their dead and they consider them to be around them all the time, they're around them all the time. So you have all kinds of activity, as opposed to here where it's considered an anomalous thing to have a ghost encounter because we tell people from a very young age, oh, it's not real, just ignore it, it'll go away.
See, what I'm having a hard time with was we had a medium on Sunday, and my mother passed on the 26th. And one of the things she told me at the end of the show, thank you. One of the things she said at the end of the show was she's going to touch you. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
All right. So someone's touched me on my back of my elbow twice.
Nice.
And since that night, and I'm not joking. I wish I was because I don't want this to be. No, listen, I'm not celebrating it. I actually told my mom after the second one that was enough. Like, no more touching. If you want, because it's a weird feeling. It's not like I got pushed. I just felt like someone went twice. I was like, that's twice. I was like, enough. I haven't had it since, which is good. But like, yeah, I felt like I got touched twice. It's the freakiest thing. I'm being serious. But mediums, are they? How do you? Right. This is a big one. How do you cut off the fringe ones and like, how do you know who to trust? I guess is what I'm saying.
So if you had asked me this 16 years ago when I started doing all this, I would have said they're all a bunch of frauds. Yep. But I've learned over the years that is a very wrong approach to have. We all are capable of mediumship. We're all capable of tapping into that. The problem is most of us have that block, that filter, that because we were told ghosts aren't real when we were younger, we kind of lose that ability. But I look at it like this. Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, for now until Mac Jones surpasses him. But as the greatest I'm not that much of a homer. I know Tom Brady will be the greatest for a long time. So Tom Brady was born with an innate ability to throw a football far better than the average human being. But he still put in the work all the time to better himself and to be able to do that great skill at an even higher level. And so there are some mediums who tap into that surface level connection, and that's enough for them, and they never try to go further. And then there's somebody like my friend Stephanie who's dedicated her whole life to getting better at it and just keeps expanding that ability. So I try to avoid the people who are still at that surface level, and I look for the people that have the repeated, continuous, direct connections that really make people say, holy shit, when they have a reading. as opposed to the people that just come away and go, oh yeah, she definitely talked to my mother. That was definitely my mother. I want the people that can't come out of there and say, I went into this thinking there was no way she was going to be able to, and then it turned out to be my mother. And I've seen it happen. I've had it happen for me. And then the other big part of it is you can kind of learn as you go along how to detect people that are frauds. And the biggest way you can detect somebody as a fraud is cold reading. So when they're in a gallery and they're saying, I'm picking up on somebody around here recently lost somebody, starts with an M. Mike, I don't know what your mom's name was, but, say her name was Dolores. I could be like, yeah, but the M is from mom. It was somebody's mom passed away here. So you keep going through this until you get a hit, and then it's really easy to read people from that hit and see where they go. I know I've done it.
Tim, I'm Italian from Rhode Island. I bullshit with the best of them. I can't stand watching those open room things. It's ridiculous. I mean, and the way that people react are ridiculous. I'm picking up somebody with 2 legs, and everyone's like, it's that wide open.
And that falls on the audience, though. The audience should really be far more discerning. The problem is you've got a room full of people who are in that room because they're already believers, and they're already in a state of grief, and they want to be the one who has that connection. So you're coming at that. It's not the way that you would scientifically test if this is real or not, because you've already rigged the game far too much with the people that are in there. And another thing is those people are all in a heightened emotional state, and all you have to be a good cold reader is empathic. If you can pick up on those feelings that people are having, you can kind of guess the next question to go to. So I like to do double blind testing and things like that when I'm trying to figure something out rather than go into that type of a format. I look at those as entertaining, and I tell Stephanie I see those as therapy for the people that are in those sessions. She tells me that that's actually where it's wrong, because it shouldn't be therapy. It should actually be something that's more directed, and it's not just necessarily for closure for somebody, because the person who's doing it is not a trained psychologist to be able to do that properly. So what ends up happening, and I've seen it happen more often than not, the person who gets that reading then becomes dependent on that medium and starts shelling out $50 every week because they can't go through the proper stages of grief and let them go. A really good medium and a really trustworthy medium is the kind of medium that tells the person after the second or third time they call them, listen, I don't think we should do this anymore. You need to go speak to a counselor because you're not processing this grief properly.
All right, so I would want to do a documentary on the people that don't get called upon and call it rejected, and just see how sad they must be and feel like, oh, you know what? No one in my family loved me enough to come through. Like, they're going home at that thought in their head. They have to be.
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm sure some people go away disappointed, but I do think some people just seeing other people make those connections, that kind of makes them feel better about their situation too. There's a place called Lilydale in New York, and I've had the chance to go and visit there. It's the world's oldest and largest community of operating mediums. And you have to pass a series of tests to be allowed to live and work as a medium in Lilydale. And when you go there, you go and you pay as a visitor $22 to get in for the day. And while you're there, they have all these gallery readings in different places that are free. You just go and attend. You can go get a private reading if you want to pay for it, but there's these free galleries where they're picking people out right and left. And then they'll also give you classes where they teach you exactly why some people might get it, some people don't. So, you can't expect your relative to come through in a group full of people if they weren't the kind of person that would have stood up in front of a group of people and talked. So it's just as much about the spirit as it is the person that wants to receive that message. So you can still learn, even if you're not the one getting the message, about what the healing is that's involved in that situation.
Tim, I got to tell you, I was when I went to Paracon late last year in November, and I saw you lecture. Before I saw you lecture, I went to see Tiffany Rice. Now, I've seen Tiffany Rice about a dozen times. She's never come up to me, never talked to me. She came to my wife a few times when she was alive, and she had like pretty profound things to say to her. But I've had mediums. I've hosted gallery readings to raise money for fundraisers and stuff. And they've come to me each time and like talked to me about Heather and whatnot. She passed away in 2019. But Tiffany came up to me. She started the reading, and I was, oh, who wants the reading? Everybody put their hands up. I was just kind of sitting there in the back, like, whatever. I'm just kind of here to observe. And she walked up to like this woman. She was doing, like you say, almost like a cold reading, and she's like searching for names, searching for answers. And I was sitting there the whole time, like, yeah, this is why people think mediums are full of shit, because she's just like reaching for answers and that. And I was completely not negative, but I was like completely like meh about it the whole time. She finished with that woman. She came right up to me and she just started talking about my wife in intimate details. Like I don't know if you guys can see it. Yeah, you can see it. But the wall here, I painted this when I moved into this basement apartment here. I painted it purple because my wife loved purple. And I was thinking because Heather, she loved purple. I'm going to paint it purple. It's a soothing feeling. It's a soothing color. And Tiffany mentioned, thank you for painting the room purple because Heather really loves that. It's just like the crazy, her and Ron Comtois, the crazy detail that these people give me. It's just like, as a paranormal investigator, I can wrap my head around it. I think it's my wife talking to me or talking to them. But I don't know. It's just it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. You know how these people know this insane detail. They know details like from when she died, like just like this.
To be fair, I shouldn't say that cold reading is necessarily a bad thing. Some mediums, and I've seen Tiffany do this. She's done it when she's been here on the radio with us. Some mediums, that's actually how they get started with their reading. Is like if they're not getting a direct wham, somebody walks in front of them, they do that process to try to get that connection started. And I've seen her go through that, and that's her method. Mm-hmm. Other people like Stephanie, like she has to close her eyes and turn them away. She has to learn to block them out because they're always so much around her. So for her to start doing a reading, it's not that hard for her to connect. Other people, it's all in how much you are able to turn that switch off and on. Mm-hmm. So in that regard, I would say, like, think about this. Look at a radio. I'm surrounded by radios here. I collect radios. Radio waves are out there always. They're always around us, but you can't always hear them. You have to turn on the device that has the correct receptors to be able to pull in that signal and then translate it into a sound that your ear can hear. Some people will have not anymore, but in the days of metal fillings in your teeth, mm-hmm. They would have their fillings rattle when they were too close to a radio station because those radio waves would affect them. Other people can't be that close to power lines because they'll affect them. Some people can pick up on that on their own. And I think what's happening is when you have somebody like that can pick up on that, she's always around you. She's always broadcasting this information. Mm-hmm. You just don't have the radio turned on. And in her case, she can pick up on those waves without having the radio turned on, whereas you might need to turn on a spirit box, and then she'll come through for you. It's just your way to translate whatever that energy is into a way that you can process it.
Hey, Genius, what did you think about that?
I liked it. This is what I was going to kind of end with. Tim, we talked about a bunch of different things. We talked about just some of your paranormal, just like kind of ghost hunting. We talked mediums. We talked Bridgewater Triangle. We talked Salem. We talked a whole bunch of different things. And I know, and what I kind of loved hearing was kind of how your views have evolved over the years and as you gain more and more knowledge. So I'm kind of just curious, where are you what's your focus right now, and what are you kind of looking to do next?
So right now I'm actually working on a new idea that I'm probably going to put together as a lecture and then maybe as a book. But I've gotten out of the prove it business. Like, I'm not looking to prove to anybody anymore that this stuff is real. Come on the journey with me or don't. But I need to get more into the why and the how. And I think that's where the field needs to go as in general. Part of the problem with the why and the how, though, is filtering out some of the, like I was saying before, the legend intercepting with the fact.
Glitz and the glam.
So I'm working on something now to look at history that's both true and untrue and how that affects the way that the paranormal is investigated. Because how many times have we gone to places, buddy, where we've had encounters with these spirits that we've heard about from other people, mm-hmm. and when you get into the research, you realize that there's no reason for that spirit to have.
Doesn't even exist. My current case right now, they thought it was a funeral home, and there's nothing historically to even like remotely suggest that. And
so I want to figure out what that means and why that happens. I think I have an answer. I think it's because of us, the living, and the way that we infect the energetic environment around us. But I want to look into some other, cases like that a little bit more in depth.
They thought the house was a funeral home at one point.
They did. Well, it's not a house. It's a business right now. It's actually a restaurant right now. But the history points to like convenience store, bakery.
Was it Italian owned?
Italian. It's originally an Italian home.
No.
Right now.
I'm trying to be serious here because
I'm being serious too, Michael.
They used to have showings.
The original owners were Italian, and I can show you their immigration record, but there's no record from the point that the building was built in 1932. Even before that, the land before that, there's nothing to suggest that it was a funeral home. But
no, what I'm saying to you is though, if it was Italian owned, there's a decent chance that somebody dead might have been shown off in that house at one point.
Right,
because
probably.
You show them off in your own house around here. That's what they used to do.
They used to do that.
Maybe going 2 generations back, it used to be in your house.
Well, I mean, buddy, you probably encountered this around here with these investigations. We would bury our families on our own property.
Right.
Because there were no church graveyards around here. So
honestly, I'm involved with a local historical cemetery restoration group, and there's a cemetery in Smithfield, Rhode Island, town that I'm in now, and the historical cemetery is like here. There's a gravestone here, and then the house foundation is like right here. It's like right on top of it, so you know that they built on top of a cemetery. There's like no, and the house is ridiculously haunted.
All I can think of is poltergeist.
Yeah,
you left the bodies, but you moved the headstones.
Right, like poltergeist. Yeah.
Yeah, which is that movie. I was between the tennis balls and the goop and all the catchphrases that woman had.
That little lady was
my favorite movie of all time.
Oh, it was scary just seeing the picture. Like it would be in the back of comic books. I got a couple comics that have a picture of her in just the TV screen.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they might have been magazines like Cracked or something like that. But I remember seeing the promotion for it. Even that picture scared the crap out of me. Little girl staring in front of a TV that was glowing, and you're like, "Shit, what is going to happen now? Nothing good."
Yeah, but Tim, that sounds really cool, really fascinating. I love that angle, especially with the history part you were just talking about how the living and the investigators and the energy might be impacting kind of what actually happened there. That's really cool. Thanks.
The history and the haunts.
Yeah, cool.
Buddy, what do you got?
Okay, join us again. I mean, Tim, I could talk to you for hours about history and the paranormal, and then everything else that you have in your show. And
we will.
I'm sorry. We'll try and have you back again and do another special Wednesday night because it's nice to have a beer on a Wednesday night. But join us next week. Join us on Sunday. We have from the halls of the Gardner Hill Asylum for over 13 years, entertained Southern New England through through podcasts, cable access, TV shows, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, all that good stuff. He's also a paranormal investigator who's investigated in the Payne House in Rhode Island and Smith's Castle in Rhode Island, Fort Adams in Rhode Island, which is a phenomenal place. Various other places with various other investigators. Chuckles the Clown will be joining us on Sunday.
I don't like that.
Wait a minute. Time out.
We're having a clown, guys. We're having a clown. He's not here to amuse you, Mike.
Wait a minute. Stop.
He's just a clown. He's not here to amuse you.
Listen to me. Are you saying that this guy's like a clown, like a bozo? Or are you trying to tell me that he dresses up like a clown?
He dresses up like a clown. And he does horror and paranormal stuff as a clown. And he'll come on the show as Chuckles the Clown.
I don't.
Kev.
I'm busy.
I can't. I'm going to be sick.
He's not here to amuse you. He's not here to amuse you.
Tim,
buddy, I saved the whistle for sports shows. You're getting the whistle. This is. I don't know if I can do a clown doing horror.
Chuckles the
Clown.
Talk.
Tim,
I've known Chuckles for years.
Chuckles is a great guy. He's a historian. He comes from a long line of historians, and I met Chuckles or Charles, if you will, in another historical organization, and he's a phenomenal guy, and he's going to make a great guest.
I'm not worried about his sort of skills and capabilities. I'm worried that I'm going to be terrified hearing this stuff from someone that looks like a clown, because clowns are scary enough as it is.
He's a creepy motherfucking looking clown.
Yeah,
Clown.
he's not a happy
If
clown.
I was afraid of clowns, I would be afraid of Chuckles. But I like Chuckles because he's a good clown.
Yeah, it's gonna be great when nobody watches the show because they're scared of goddamn clowns. What do you think of the show? I wouldn't watch it. There was a clown on it. I understand. You know what I mean? If he can do balloon animals, though, he's in with me.
He might be able to do balloon animals.
Tim, I really appreciate it. I've seen so many things that you've done, and you break things down perfectly. You can tell that you've been doing this for a long time. You can tell that you've been involved in certain things, and I can tell you what. You can tell that the sports angle helps you. That sportsman drive helps you in everything else. It's just a way of breaking things down. But thank you again for being on. Is there anything you want us to promote before we go?
Nope. Just people can tune into Midnight Society Friday nights at Midnight FM. That's midnight.fm. You can subscribe there and hear all of our past episodes. And then Saturday night, Spooky South Coast. That's at WBSM.com or SpookySouthCoast.com. And then at our SpookySouthCoast.com site, we have a couple of events coming up that we'll be doing this year at the Wayside Inn in Sudbury, Massachusetts, and the SK Pierce Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts. And plus, we'll be doing a whole bunch more that we just haven't put up there yet. So, after the last couple of years, we've got to help these historic places stay alive.
What's funny is before you said all that stuff, you actually said, nah. Go back and watch the tape. Tim goes, nah. And then he goes, boom, and the 6 or 7 things in a row.
That's low-level promotion for me.
Yeah.
I'm just busting chops. All right, I had a great time. So for Tim Weisberg, for Buddy Thayer, for the Genius Kev, it's me, Mike Lepre, King Mike Hill. This was Legit Paranormal, brought to you by LegitPodcast.com. Tomorrow night's Thursday. We have Legit Fantasy Football at 7, Legit Fantasy Basketball at 8, and then we will see you on Sunday for more Legit Paranormal. We are out.